Hi there, it's Callum, and I've got a very special presentation today. This is a little bit different, something we haven't done before, but we're with Gold Booming. I wanted to get Hedley in, who's the CEO of Lion Selection Group, a resource-focused fund and familiar face for most of us here. And also today we have Kris Butera, who is the Managing Director of the exploration company Plutonic. And today we're talking Hypergiants. So to set the scene for this, last year I was at the Lion AGM and there was a couple of presentations, including from Hedley and some of the companies that he's invested in. But by far the most interesting one was from Kris, who introduced the idea to me, which I hadn't really ever considered before, of hunting for Hypergiant Goldfields. So Hedley, to start off, we'll start with you. Can you tell us what is a Hypergiant Goldfield and what perhaps some of the famous examples in history?
Well, I'm pleased you asked me because Kris and I sometimes have different answers to questions, and Hypergiant is an expression which I'd have to attribute to Kris. But in my own words, I think Kris's mentality is there's no point exploring for something small because they're just as hard to find and nowhere near as rewarding. And that's one of the things that led us to Plutonic, was Kris's mentality of let's set the target threshold high and then go looking for things in places where people haven't looked, where there is still the possibility of finding a large, very, very large deposit or even a new district, because large deposits tend to be the crown jewel in a district when you find them. So I think that's the concept of Hypergiants, looking for something which is truly large. And if I had to put an example to that, that'd be the discovery of an Olympic dam or Acadia or a Telfer. Those scale of systems, which are...
So just in terms of ounces, for those who aren't geologists and that, yep. What's some sort of benchmark?
Well, Kris, gives a threshold to be in a hypergiant.
So, the current definitions of giant are about 13.2 million ounces, I think, from memory. Don't quote me completely directly, but it's 13.2. And so a supergiant would be 132 million ounces. So you're getting up to Olympic dam sort of size. And a hypergiant would be something not so much an order of magnitude larger in that scale, but larger than 100 to 200 million ounces. And again, this is very difficult to achieve in a single mineral system. So Morintal might be an example in Uzbekistan, a couple hundred million ounces. But for us, it's more about the combined size of a mineral system, and that's what we seem to have in the desert. A system that's got multiple events all happening, everything interconnected as one sort of camp scale system. I don't think it's fair to call the Macquarie Arc or the Yilgarn a hypergiant system because they're multiple systems spread out. But a single sort of uniquely genetically related system over a large area that could generate a couple 100 million ounces or the equivalent thereof.
So tell us about yourself a little bit. I presume you came through like a conventional path of working for one of the big resource companies, and at some point you've branched out. Is that what happened?
I don't think any large resource company would employ someone like me. I don't fit the mould too much.
Well, tell us how you came into the game.
Oh, look, I've always been interested in gold. My old man and his mates used to take me out pounding when I was very young. So by the time I was 10 or 11, I was telling people I want to be the managing director of the world's greatest exploration company and mining company, and they took me to the psychiatrist because I thought I had delusions of grandeur, but here we are. I've done it.
Speaking of breaking moulds, you've broken a few psychiatrists along the way.
Yeah, probably. But so I went to uni, and at one point, I was interested in astrophysics as well, and I had to sort of choose the path that would actually pay some money at the time. In hindsight, probably might have enjoyed astrophysics a bit, but the opportunity to get out into the middle of nowhere and have beers with mates over a campfire, though we can't do that anymore, but we used to, and just be out places where people haven't been or are unwilling to go because it's...
So as I understand it, Plutonic is in the Simpson Desert, right?
Yes, we've got two projects. We've got one in the northern Simpson Desert on the NT side of the Queensland NT border, and we've got the Georgetown project in North Queensland that sits between Georgetown itself, about 5 or 6 hours west of Cairns and Croydon, which is the next major town up the road, about 140 odd kilometres away. So we're in the middle, just south of the Savannah Way, at a place called Gilbert River.
For those watching, and me included, where do you even start with something like this? How do you even find yourself in the middle of the...
Oh, this is a good question. So our other director, Amanda Buckingham, and I, in previous work we've done together, had used some of the technology that she's developed, which are best described as algorithm-derived structure detection. It's hard for me to even say all that in one sentence, let alone understand how it works. But through her PhD, which I think she used to work with Nick Archibald, and I can't remember.
These are pin-ups in the applying science and technology to exploration, resulted in some enormous finds in North America, and Amanda was part of that team.
Yeah, so she developed these algorithms that allow you to take geophysical data and tells you where the structures are, as opposed to across the old geologists that interpret structures. These are based on physics of the field, and they put you into right areas for really trying to work out where fluids might migrate to from deeper down. And that can occur at the local scale, but also at the big continent scale. So we used those data sets to hone into the Queensland side of the border originally, looking for inoxide copper gold deposits. And after a year or two of waiting for applications to be granted, I think we were struggling with the native title party on that side of the border. But we noticed some quartz veins, or things that look like quartz veins, or big white things on the Northern Territory side of the border. So we decided to peg that ground. We went out there and found a massive epithermal quartz vein just sticking out of the ground.
You then go to the Northern Territory government and say you want to, what is the practicality of, how do you lock up whatever you're looking at?
Yeah, no, we just make an application through the NT government. So most of our ground, all of our ground is on pastoral leases on cattle stations, and we did have an application that's still sort of pending on freehold Aboriginal ground, so that involves lengthy negotiations and stuff like that, but that just sits there for the time being. But most of our ground hosts very large mineral systems, basically.
So once you have that data, you then come to Hedley and say, I need financing. Is that what happens next? I need some money to keep going.
That would be the conventional model, yeah. But as Kris said, he breaks the mould most of the time. And Kris and I, we went to university together. He was the year above me. So I've known Kris since, we argue about this too, I think it was 1997. But anyway, exactly.
Do you agree on anything?
It's sometimes best to have healthy debate, right? So Kris and I have known each other for a long time, not continuously. Kris went off and did a PhD in Queensland and lost track of each other. But we'd been talking about what he was doing in Plutonic for a while. And the way I regarded that was fascinating, but far too early stage for what Lion was investing in. And besides, at the time that we were talking about that, Lion was completely committed to working its way out of some situations, which turned into large-scale sales for us. We were distracted. So I was trying to help just in terms of ideas and things like that. It was the odd coffee now and then. We got to the point where we were investing again, and still regarded it as a too early stage for us, but I didn't understand the potential. So it was difficult for me to be helpful to Kris without having go to visit. And I had a trip planned to Mount Isa in North Queensland. And I said, well, if you're going to be out there, how about I drive and meet you in the desert? We'll just pop 7 hours down the road through a very remote area. The way it worked out, we rendezvoused somewhere and all drove in together. So that was an opportunity for me to spend a couple of nights out there and have a look at it. So it was an odd way of coming to terms with it, but I came back from that trip having recognised the enthusiasm that Kris and some of the other guys in the company had for the ground, but also having seen firsthand what they were looking at in terms of surface evidence. So that was what led to us investing. So typically, yeah, there'd be a pitch and we'd decide whether or not we wanted to have a little look. And in this case, probably the pitch came second and the field visit had come first.
And once you've got a few dollars in your pocket, what happens then? What are you doing? What are you using that money for?
I think we started with a heap of rock chip geochemical sampling. And we've collected almost 1,300 samples now across only a very small part of the project. It's a huge project, 6,500 square kilometres. We're focused on about 1,500 of those kilometres at the moment. And then we did a massive IP survey last year, so big induced polarisation survey over a few of our prospects. Still heaps to go that we'll get back to eventually, but through that survey we've worked up really good targets. I think we've got 4 separate targets that we want to drill this year, and we've done all sorts of other stuff, hyperspectral, airborne hyperspectral. We've done geomechanical modelling, numerical modelling, which is a little bit different for a company of our size, and that helps us to pin the sort of orientation of the movements of stress and strain fields to try to predict where you might get dilation in veins, so veins opening up to allow fluids to come in to create ore bodies, right? So that was really good. We did that with John McClellan and Nick Oliver up in North Queensland, and it's the good thing about that. It sort of reinforces all of our ideas and another data for the area, and maps out really well. We sort of independently generated our prospects. So
I think you said in your last speech, because it's so hot there, you can only do it at a certain time of year. Is that correct?
Yeah, it gets pretty warm from mid-September through to, well, even when we get out there in April, it's still pretty warm. And I think even last year in the middle of winter, we had a string of days, 8 days over 40 degrees in August, which is unusual because commonly it's only 18 to 22 that time of the year. But it's, you can work through the heat if you manage it, but it's more about once it rains out there, you sort of, for the wet season, which usually starts late September, early October, through to sort of late April. And it's not necessarily on the station itself, it's the big rivers in Western Queensland that you have to.
And are you out there by yourself, or have you got people around you? Or
Normally we've got a camp of 3 or 4 people. Our field manager, we've got another general manager as well, comes out from time to time.
And how long are you out there for?
I was out there for 3 months last year.
Well, it was a continuous field presence, wasn't it, from late April through till early October, I think?
So about six months. We'd make best use of the time available.
And that would have varied from 3 or 4 people in camp through to maybe 20 at the peak?
Yeah, we had lots of IP surveys and visitors and stuff like that.
And just on a personal level, do you go a bit loopy, or do you like being out there?
What does it look like?
I've accidentally run over some chairs and stuff in camp when I was a bit tired. Last year I think we all went loopy.
It would take a certain type though to do that kind of work, right?
It's mentally challenging being that remote for that long.
So when you say you're drilling this year, is it difficult to get the equipment out there, or?
No, as long as the roads are good and the weather's sort of behaving, it's pretty easy. The access out there is really good. So the roads on the station, the tracks on the station are much better than the highways that you take to get from.
And then when the drill bit goes in, how long does all that take?
Well, I think for out in the desert, we've got about 1.5 to 2 months worth of drilling. So it's about 2,000 metres of diamond drilling.
What do you reckon you could drill in 24 hours with a diamond drill rig?
Diamond being the best, right? The top of the line.
Yeah. It gives you the best information because you get a continuous stick of core.
Most expensive.
So, it is depending where you're drilling. But how much do you reckon you could drill of that?
Look, on a medium-sized hole average, you're comfortable or happy with an average of 30 to 35 metres a shift. So in a day, it'd be about 60 to 70 metres would be. That's okay. At the start of the hole, you'd get more metres, and as you get deeper, it gets a bit slower. So assuming that there's no major issues, about 30, 35.
So if you were drilling a 300-metre hole, it's probably 10 days' work, right?
Well, 10 odd shifts, so about 5 days, 5-6 days. By the time they do the collar and move and stuff like that, you had an extra day. So.
And when the samples come up, are you able to tell straight away, or do they have to go away and be assessed?
Well, it depends on the style of mineralisation. So, we'd see sulphides, we'd be pretty happy. We still won't know what the grade or potential grade might be from that particular project. But, if it's a gold-silver system, we should see a little bit of sulphide in the right spots in the quartz veins. And, if there's a hint of copper around, signifying a potentially overprinting system that came around later, we'll see evidence of that pretty easily with the copper, much easier to spot and estimate.
Just as an industry observation, what we're talking about is brownfield exploration versus greenfield, right? Yep. So how much industry dollars go into brownfield versus greenfield?
I think there's probably... I think it'd probably be about 5 times more money goes into brownfield exploration than greenfield. But then that definition itself is... there is probably some Australian Bureau of Statistics person that has defined that as being a certain number of metres from where nearest defined resource is. So, for me, greenfields is where you take a concept and say, nobody's looked out there. This is what I think the reasoning should be about why it's prospective, and then going chasing that. Difficult to do that Kris mentioned the Yilgarn before. This is where most of the gold mining is in Western Australia, the southern half of Western Australia. there are not many places in the Yilgarn where you can say we are doing genuine greenfields now, because there is already a very defined idea of where is most prospective. You need to be in greenstone rocks, and that's where the gold systems have operated. So we're well off that beaten path now. And what we're looking for in this greenfields is the definition of success is showing that there is the system that we think has operated. Our observations at the surface very strongly give us that, but there's always this disconnect, I think, particularly in marketing companies that are exploring. When you're looking at the surface, you can have all the confidence you want, but investors sitting that next row back are wanting for you to have drilled and showed that that exists in the third dimension. And once you can do that, then you take the next steps forward. It would be incredibly rare to step into some drilling here and have an economic discovery. I think it's what we're looking for is the encouragement that we're in that system. I mean, someone told me that it takes an average of 17 drill holes to discover a deposit. Now, we're drilling in a district here, so we're going to drill 10 holes, 11 holes, I think, at Champion, into 4 targets. So we're going to go nowhere near the 17th hole on this run. But, you know, we will find alteration, we will find the right kind of rocks. And as Kris says, quite probably we'll see some sulfides, maybe in quite low quantities, but we'll see. We're drilling on targets which have been, we think, generated by sulfides. So we're looking for that evidence, and that will then put us in a position to be able to say, well, do we throw more money at this? And if so, where are we focusing it? So, you know, that Greenfields process is something which not many people observe until right at the end where you've had a success. But there's this 10, 20 years of build up to it. And this thought process is already more than a decade old in Kris's mind. That perseverance is required to get you to the point of being, what did Mark Bennett call it last night? A shining light in a sea of gloom. You don't see that until it lights up. But there is a hell of a lot of work that gets up to that point. And Plutonic is a company which is unlisted. It can exist in the unlisted space because it's got strong supporters that understand that mentality. And for that reason, you know, it's probably far better prepared to make a discovery than a listed company. So your question of, do you go and cash in on what's going on in the goldfields? Well, great. You go, gold's roaring, let's go and raise some money and look for gold in WA, pick up whatever ground is available and try to be a genius on it. It's like running on in the last 5 minutes of a footy match when you're down by, you're a Hawthorn supporter, so you would be quite au fait with being down by 10 goals with 5 minutes to go. You know, how is a person going to change that outcome in 5 minutes of play? You can be as good a player, but you're constrained by so many factors, which is the 17 other people who've been losing the game convincingly at that point. You know, so exploration is something which you can't be immediately successful at. And we're now, you know, getting to the point where there's been this intellectual investment to develop this idea. And that would be very difficult to do in a short period of time in the Western Australian analogy. So that's where the mindset of Plutonic is so determined to be focused on this. This idea has been in mind for so long, it now needs to be tested.
So what sort of timeline are we talking here? I mean, you get some drill results this year, and then what happens next year? More drill results or drilling?
Well, it depends on how successful we are. I guess if we snag a discovery or two, things could look very different. You know, multiple drill rigs or other deals with third parties or spin-offs or all sorts of things. If we've, you know, drilled enough and have enough idea that, you know, we are in the mineral system and it's then just a matter of vectoring towards the ore, then I'd imagine, you know, it'd look similar to this year, but maybe a rig at each project or a couple of rigs, depending on, again, how confident we are based on those results.
Well, I mean, we're fat tail research, so that's what we love, these fat tail ideas where you have a, you know, a remote kind of, or long odds you might say, but the payoff is so enormous that you've got to have a crack at it. So when are you heading out there this year?
We'll be up in the desert from hopefully about mid to late July, and we'll be at Georgetown from hopefully mid-May to mid-July.
And the results will come back at the end of all that?
Well, they should feed through while we're drilling.
Feed through.
Yeah.
So about mid-year, we'll have to get a checkup.
Oh, I think we definitely should. Yeah. And I mean, Kris is fantastic on images and photos and videos and stuff like that. That's something that we're talking about. So maybe we could
you can actually follow Kris on LinkedIn too, because
Yep.
you're a fantastic photographer by the looks of it.
Thank you. That's very fun.
He's particularly good at taking pictures of thunderstorms on days when the landscape looks great, but there's no thunderstorm there. So it's unusual how he can do that.
Well, he uses his algorithms for a bit of Photoshop.
Look up Kris on LinkedIn because it's not just the photos, but the discussion of exploration concepts and things like that are just really good things for investors who are wanting to find out more about the space to be reading and thinking about. So check out Kris, give him a follow.
Absolutely. All righty, we'll leave it there. So thank you, boys, for coming in. And, well, what we can say is exciting time to be in gold.
It's a very exciting time to be in gold. Prices going up, companies performing, discoveries happening.
And good luck.
Thank you very much, Cal. I appreciate it. Cheers,
Good
mate.
on you, Cal. Cheers, mate.